Hi and welcome back to my channel. On a recent video I posted, I talked about uh, getting interested, getting started into wedding photography and some ideas about how you get started. I thought I'd elaborate on that today, on the whole idea of getting a gig as an assistant, either paid or unpaid, with a professional seasoned wedding photographer. When I used to teach my course on wedding photography many years ago, I offered to people who did the course, and many took me up on it, to actually come along on a wedding. I didn't promise more than one wedding, but to come along on a wedding, I would pay them some money and they could be my assistant on the day so they could learn. Some of those people ended up doing more than just the one wedding, but all benefited from it. I certainly benefited from it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, how you can assist another photographer and how you can learn yourself, and it's a way of getting into the whole scene of wedding photography. I'm going to be reading from some notes that I have on my screen here in front of me. I've written about this on my photography training blog before, and so I'm going to read some of that, and then I'll put a link so you can actually read it and go back through it yourself. If I think of anything else to add while I go, I will. So here we go. I'll be reading from this, so I'll be, doing this thing, going back and forth. So, here we go. By far, in my opinion, the best way to get into wedding photography is by assisting a seasoned wedding photographer on at least one shoot or several. To a certain extent, you can have this experience by watching YouTube videos, but it's not the same as being there. There is a benefit to the assistant and to the main shooter if you are doing this. For the main shooter, the assistant can do all of these things, and it depends a little bit on how experienced they might be coming into it as well. The assistant can help to navigate and sometimes drive your car. That's happened to me where I've had to, because we were running late, I've had to say to my assistant, can you park the car while I race over there and start taking some photos? Make sure you don't leave gear behind and carry some of your gear for you. You know, it's embarrassing, but sometimes on wedding shoots, I've had my assistant come up and say, did you want this? Did you want this camera? Which I'd left on a rock 100 yards away. So it's very helpful to have an assistant to go around picking up after you and making sure you've got everything, because that's a trap. When you're shooting a wedding in the busyness of it, sometimes you put things down and don't know where you put them, or you forget you put them down. The assistant can remind you during the day of shots you may have missed earlier, and sometimes you run out of time in the pre-wedding shoot. But important shots that you missed can be caught up with later. Sometimes I'd be sitting in the car on the way to the next location, because you do wedding photography in about 4 or 5 locations usually, and I'd say to my assistant, look, I missed doing that shot back there, which is fairly important, but we can catch it up. Can you remind me when we get either to the reception venue or just after the ceremony when we're doing family shots, to make sure I get that shot that I missed back there at the house? What else? The assistant can hand you different cameras, lenses, and assist with lighting and reflectors, etc. Now, they'll be limited in how much they can do with this, because they won't necessarily know what you're talking about, but anyone who's into photography and wants to do it will have a fair idea of what a reflector is and what cameras are and what lenses are, and all they've got to do is hand them over to you. But you've got to school them up beforehand to tell them where they are, where you've got them, in which bag you've got them, and all that sort of stuff. The assistant, I always used to say to the assistant, look, you can borrow one of my cameras, you can take some shots on the side. I'm not including you in the price that my customer is paying to be shooting as a second shooter. However, I'm happy for you to take some shots while you're here from different angles, and you might get some shots that I won't get, and you'll learn from doing that as well. So it's a good thing. I always used to say when I'm doing a wedding, I mean, some people are pretty fussy about people shooting over your shoulder, but I didn't worry too much about that, although there'll be a lot more of that going on these days with mobile phones. But I didn't worry too much about that, because someone shooting over your shoulder might get a shot that you just missed, or you happen to take your eye away and missed the moment. So your assistant, and usually if you are a good wedding photographer you'll pick up on this too, but your assistant can be observing things while they are not under pressure but you are, and they can pick up some relationship issues in the family during the shoot, and they can make you aware of them so you can be a bit more sensitive in how you handle people. Handling people in a wedding is just as important as the technical and the photography skills. The assistant can make creative suggestions to you. I've had that, particularly a more experienced assistant can say, well, you've taken a lot of shots just in that spot, what about coming over there? Yep, you're right, exactly, we'll go over there. And an assistant who's learning can ask questions that make you think about what you are doing, and that's a good thing. You can always learn from someone else, and sometimes you can just have blinkers on, be narrow, straight ahead and very focused, and sometimes people can think outside the square, outside your square or outside your viewfinder. And sometimes, particularly the young lady assistants, more so than the men, can help with things at the shoot, like when you go to the house where the guys are. Most people don't know how to put a flower in a buttonhole and all those sort of things. And similar things as that at the girls' place, where they put the flowers on the lapel and how to put them there. But if you've got someone who's a little bit savvy about that, that can be a huge help, and the people really appreciate your assistant doing that. So some benefits, they were the benefits for the person who's hiring you or giving you the experience. The benefits for the assistant, it's invaluable hands-on experience of the dynamic of a wedding shoot, including the time constraints. It's all very well to practice wedding photography in a formal training course, but you're really not able to capture the urgency and the timing that goes on. Things move quickly when you're photographing a wedding, so it's invaluable for them to understand the time constraints and the dynamics of a wedding. And they learn about thinking on their feet as well, because as a wedding photographer you've got to be able to switch the thought you had a second ago to something else, and they can learn about that as they see you doing that. They learn about relating to customers, what to say and what not to say. They can be learning and fine-tuning and practicing their camera skills. They can bring their own camera or one that you give to them. And I always used to say, well, you can keep the photos that you take and use it for your own education, but I'd like the SD card or whatever for my collection as well, because there may be some shots that I'd like to give to the customer. Usually you should be getting some payment for your services. Way back when I was doing it, I would pay people $50, which is a pretty small amount, but they'd just done my training course, and but they were happy to pay the $50 as an extension of the training, that they were happy to get the $50 as an extension of the training, and they weren't actually expecting it. And sometimes as people became regular assistants, well then I was paying them more than that, of course. So being an assistant can help you decide whether you want to be a wedding photographer or not. You won't know until you've actually been out there and tasted the fun of it, and the anxiety of it, the stress of it, and the vibes that are coming from everyone there. I just lost a bit of light here. I'll just put that back again now. Just bear with me a second. Where did it go? So it will help you to decide whether you want to be a wedding photographer or not. You can gain some experience in editing wedding photos if you are allowed to by the principal photographer, or engaged to do so. The photographer might realise that you've got some pretty good skills and they might ask you to do some editing for them. So if you want to become an assistant, to get a foot in the door to become a wedding photographer, I would recommend you simply approach someone you know, perhaps a wedding photographer you know, a friend, family member that does it, or contact listed photographers who may be very glad of some help. And you could also contact your local Professional Photographers Association where wedding photographers are registered, and approach them and say, look, I'm available, I would like to learn to be a photographer. Are any of your photographers on your books? Are they interested in me coming as an assistant? So there you go. There's a few tips. Don't know what else I can say. It's a wonderful profession if you really get a feel for it, and you certainly learn how to take your photography to another level because you have to. So I hope that's been reasonably helpful today. I'll put a link through to what I've just been reading out on my blog, on my photography training blog. You'll find heaps of stuff on that training blog and on my main blog as well, which I link back to from time to time, and also some of my other YouTube videos on wedding photography. I've also got one on, I don't know whether I've linked it before, there's one on my YouTube channel called The Profile of a Wedding Photographer as well. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.